Thanks for
Let's go.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this part of the section which will be focusing on public transport. So basically the perception versus the reality from my two planning colleagues who will now also be sharing their experiences with regards to public transport. But before I begin, why I decided to do this topic, why? So my topic is basically the perception shaping car dependency, the case of Midrand, the case study of Midrand. So why I decided to do this topic is, last year I used to travel using the Gautrain a lot, and what I found myself coming to the realization of was this system is actually very convenient. Why? I'd always carry a magazine with me as I was in the train, and I would always have so much space to a point where I could read my financial mail in peace without anyone, shoving me and having, space of my own. But that's not really the point. The point is I frequent Midrand a lot because I used to grow up there for a while. So I mostly use the Gautrain, but what now irritates me the most is that I have to now wait for an Uber. But Ubers don't really take that long and it's not really a problem. But the problem is they are too expensive. So I'm trying to now figure out from my two learned colleagues, how can we go about this, system issue or system flaw, and is integrating it actually the best thing? So before I go any further, I would also like to also put light to the perspective to say another issue that's also derailing our system is electricity. Because I remember last year coming to Joburg, my trip was actually delayed due to load shedding, and now the train as well was moving very slow. But in addition to that, I'd also like to add that we're supposed to be 4 here, however we are 2, because on Saturday another colleague of mine was supposed to join us. However, load shedding struck, it got dark, and in addition to that, taxis were also finishing, and it was also not safe. So before I go any further, I'd like to allow and give platform to my two colleagues to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Dimpo. My name is Ndivhuwo, an urban and regional planning graduate doing her honors at the University of the Witwatersrand. And yes, I am here to join DK's podcast to give insight on, my perception of public transport and my experiences.
And then over to my brother over here.
Hi everyone, my name is Ronald and I'm also a graduate in urban and regional planning at Wits, also doing my honors in the same degree. I'm very honored to be featured in this very same podcast, discussing this very same issue about transport, which plays a very key role in the majority of South Africans' people's lives. So I'm very honored. Thank you for having me, Dimpo. I hope this information and the listeners will have some good insights from this podcast.
No, I thank you, Ronald, and I would like to now pose the first question. So I would like you to now share your experiences with public transport, and maybe what's the one you use the most and how you feel about it, and maybe what you think could be done better. So for the sake of respect, I would like to say ladies first. Do you mind if I
Not at all.
Please go ahead.
Not at all. I'm just talking about the city.
The city, like I know you frequent a lot, or you use the what you call it?
Metro bus.
Yes. And mostly the Uber as well.
Yes.
Okay, so you can speak about both actually.
Yeah. Okay, so public transport in Johannesburg for me has been, it's been quite a hassle, especially given that, the times I'm required to do certain things, to complete assignments, to work. Yes, my first concern with public transport is I feel like it's unsustainable in South Africa. Well, yes, South Africa and in the city. First of all, because we do not have public transport running till late, except e-hailing services, which can be very expensive. Yes, so a broad overview of the transport systems I've had to use in the city. I'm very familiar with the Metro bus, the taxi system a bit, but safety concerns gotten involved. the Gautrain and e-hailing services. So with the taxi, public transports, safety was a concern, you know, especially given that I'm traveling to the city center from where I come from. The taxi rank MTN that the taxis from where I come from go to the nearest place here. It's just, yeah, the safety aspect of it. During the day it's not too bad, but on the days where I finish late, it's very unsustainable. My safety would be compromised, so I just refrain from that. And then the other alternative is the metro bus. Now the metro bus is safer, it's, you know, it's more efficient, I would say more reliable, because, you know, there's certain time frames it leaves, it gets there. However, it's unsustainable in that after a certain time you cannot get one. So past 6, for example, if I don't use the metro bus, there's I have no other options. The Rea Vaya does not go as far as Lombardy, where I stay. So yes, and then there's the e-hailing services, the Ubers, Bolts, you know, there's again safety concerns with that. And then moreover, it's expensive, it's very expensive. Using those modes of transport every day is just, it's again unsustainable. It's, you know, it's not catering to everyone, especially the vast majority in this country. We know how we're not also fortunate to be able to travel using Ubers every day. Well, I don't use Ubers every day, but in instances where I have to travel late because I'm trying to finish an assignment, it is the only option I have, which is very expensive. And I think, you know, public transport could better accommodate such small, what can I say?
Okay, I think we'd keep that thought for later. Just keep the thought for later.
Okay,
So
okay.
You're going to my next
Yeah.
question. So let me
Yeah.
also, but thank you, Ndivhuwo. That was nice. That was so nice of you, especially sharing the experience of, you know, safety as well. To say maybe is a public transport system really safe, but we'll ponder on that as we, you know, proceed. But let me now try and also create symmetry to this engagement and allow my, you know, fellow, you know, colleague to now also share and speak about his public transport experiences. So over to you, Ronald.
Oh, wow, thank you. Well, I'd like to start by giving a broad context of how I use public transport and in my early years when I started university, first year and second year, so I was traveling, and as a traveling student, I encountered so many challenges, but also I saw so many loopholes and so many opportunities, missed opportunities, I might say, in relation to certain type of public transport. So the predominant public transport that I'd say I used was taxis. Those were my predominant use of transport, and I also used the metro rail.
Oh, interesting. Metro rail.
Yeah, metro rail.
That's
before the
Yeah.
new ones, before the new blue trains.
Yes.
That was before. So I'll start by going first over with the public taxis. Okay, yeah, I used to use the metro rail, bro. Like, it used to be a very interesting and very, I'd say, like, it taught me so much about public transport and some of the missed opportunities in relation to that. So I'll start by the taxis. As we all know, and I think Ndivhuwo, our colleague here, mentioned the one key aspect about safety. Well, I think me being a man and being a guy, like it's much more, my experiences are much more different when it comes to relation to safety, because I used to travel late, most probably, like I'll knock off at school around 5 and I'll have to travel, and I traveled maybe probably I'd say longer distances than you because it was outside the city. I think Lombardy is within Johannesburg, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, yeah. So I traveled outside the city, where I stayed used to be outside the actual city. So I stayed in Krugersdorp in the West Red. So my experiences were more like a long distance type of thing. So I used to travel late, and my experience used to be better. I didn't mind traveling late because, you know, like, but You know, taxis, they're not really conducive. You go there inside, sometimes people just come with bags and things, and then it's not really that conducive. But I'd give it one thing, they're the most accessible form of transport in relation to other form, because I feel like they go everywhere. Every place that you can go to, you probably find taxis that go to their places, and they use very key important routes, and that's something that urban planners could take. Wherever you see a taxi route, is probably one of the most key routes. It's one of the mostly used taxis, and as well as you mentioned something about taxi ranks as well. So with my research, I'll be focusing on informal trading.
Nice.
And how, yeah. So you can see that when you look at the taxi ranks, those are like the most, I think informal trading, mostly you find them there. You mostly come obviously because of the benefits of foot traffic. There's a lot of people that go there, so that's where you find them there. So in relation to that, transport and informal trading pretty much are interlinked, and we all know that based on our learning from our undergrad studying and also our research and also my research, what I found is that majority of sub-Saharan global cities, the predominantly the form of economy, it's informal economy. When you walk around, you see people, you know, trading on the streets, you see people working in all types of informal economy you can mention. So this is one critical aspect that I think is also missed in relation. That's what I was talking about when I say missed opportunities when it comes to the metro rail. Because when I used to travel with the metro rail, it used to be very interesting, and it used to be such a dope experience, because it's a very experience that is different from other transport, because this is a space whereby it's not just other public transport. You just go in and then it takes you from A to B, but right, it's more fun than that. You know, you'd walk into a metro rail and then you see people like singing, maybe like you see, let's say, I don't know how many coaches are there in the train, but it seems like they're like 13. Let me just, for argument's sake, let's just say they're 13 coaches, you know. And then these are segments. So in the segments will be divided. So you have like a first segment that would be like maybe it will be like a church. People will be there doing church. And then you'll have another coach as well, but it will be like a different church. Maybe that would be maybe a church like, how would I say, the ones that are about school.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, so there will be that church, and next to it will be maybe like more of like Abazalwa, you know, these churches of Abazalwa. So it will be that type of church. So it will be like diversity within. So it wasn't only a space of traveling, but it was also a space whereby people could interact. So it was also like a social space. And not only that, but it was also a space whereby an informal economy, informal urban space, not urban, but an informal space economy existed within this specific space of public transport. Because while you sitting there, there will be people coming, selling all types of products. Literally, I will tell people, and even including my colleagues as well, friends that I've met in university, and I will tell them that, you know, I feel like the metro rail is by far one of the most missed opportunities when you look at informal trading, because these people will literally sell everything, literally everything. And I was wondering when they introduced the new blue trains, I was like, okay, yeah, they look nice, aesthetics, they look nice, they're beautiful, they're much more comfortable. And it's something that when I used to travel, I'll be saying, why don't they make the metro rails more comfortable? Why they don't? But now looking and reflecting on that, and I'm like, you know, this introduction of these new trains kind of like kills that economy that existed within the trains, you know, because these were livelihoods of people, you know. And I read once a study by UN Habitat that they said like informal economy is the lifeblood of most African cities. You get what I'm saying? So it means that even though we all know that even in South Africa there's huge unemployment rate, so introducing such trains kind of like, you know, will force people to kind of look for other ways or other means of trading, you know. Also, like I used to also look at how Prasa used to manage their train stations, you and there's also this limit to what.
With regards to the PRASA one, I think we'll get to that one later on. We'll get to that later on. But just to keep things flowing and to progress. So I like this whole notion of missed opportunities. Missed opportunities how? Back to perceptions again. Try and think about what comes to mind when you think about a taxi. Because generally what bothers my mind or what just trickles my mind as a first point of thought is this whole idea of how taxis just go past stop signs and they don't even stop. How taxis can go or drive using the opposing lane, whereas with the how train, my focus, what I'm trying to focus on, there's some sort of a coordination. One, the how train won't just pass stop signs if it's not supposed to go. It moves from a certain point to a next destination. And then two, as well, there's a scheduled time. Unlike taxis, you can go to a taxi rank and probably wait 2 hours just for a taxi to be full and it not to now leave. These are the missed opportunities that I'm now getting as well from these other, mediums of transportation. But not to, exhaust this conversation, over to the next question. But before I go there, I would like to speak about have been, so now transitioning to the next question and just trying to now close up that point Ronald just mentioned about missed opportunities. Speaking about missed opportunities, did you know that millions have been spent on the taxi recapitalization project and the bus rapid transit system? Yet we're still talking about this whole notion of transportation. But the one other element I'd like to stress, Ronald, from your point is, did you know that during the period 2018 and 2019, the Metro Rail lost over 100 million passengers? So their numbers went down from 400 million to 300 million passengers per year. So this now leads to my next question, which is, do you think that we should integrate the transport systems into one system?
Well,
but before you continue, I'd like Ndivhuwo to go first. Just for a change of voice. I mean, we've heard your beautiful voice. Let's give Ndivhuwo a chance.
Thank you, DK. That is an interesting question, I think, and yes, it's a very broad question, but I think it's necessary. I think that I do think that transport networks in South Africa should be integrated, or find a means to work together. Like, in a sense that, for example, I'll use my personal experience. For example, right, traveling. So, okay, in Lombardy, taxis don't frequent as often. There's one street where they pass by. So I use the bus, of which only passes through Lombardy between 7 and 8 o'clock. If I miss the 8 o'clock and I don't have Uber money, that's it. I'm not coming to school. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that the integration of these transport systems, whether public or private, informal, formal, is that they find a system, a way of working together. Because apart from me being late, if for some reason there's a problem with the bus and it breaks down, I think I should be able to know the alternative, the next option. So I think these transport networks, or systems rather, should form an integrated working system where they are aware of okay, the bus passes here, okay, there's a taxi option within the same setting, there's there's different kind of network transport systems within the same area, because I think at the end of the day, when I miss the bus or something happens with the bus, I'm not thinking that like Metro, but I'm going to complain to Metro bus. I'm thinking of how quickly can I get to where I'm trying to go, and the next option would be taxis. But then, because they don't frequent where I pass often, or where I stay often, I know I'm going to be late. So I think if they worked together, it could be a thing of, okay, we've got a problem this side, but because there's some communication, there's a form of working together, I think they could better, mobility would be better, because you'd know that I don't have this option, but this is definitely an option if that one fails. And I feel like that's something that we're failing at. Yes, and I think the expansion of other transport systems would be beneficial to this integration. Because, for example, I hear you favor the Gautrain, you speak positive of it, but my problem is with that is, okay, say something happens to the taxi, something happens to the bus. Gautrain is not, for example, it doesn't reach enough places.
Yeah.
There's no station close enough to where I stay. I'd have to Uber to the Gautrain station to get to, say for example, to get to Braamfontein. To Uber to Marlborough, from Marlborough, that brings me to Gautrain, which is really, I'm still spending the same amount of money on as I would have on an Uber. So I think the integration of transport networks is important. At the same time, though, I feel that if they are to be integrated, expansion is needed. Yes.
Okay. Agreed. Ronald, and your take?
Well, I have mixed feelings. I'll say yes and no. Well, I'd say yes in the sense that diversity people benefit. So if I'm an end user and I know that I can go to a certain station and there's e-hailing, there's Uber, there's Gautrain, there's Metro Rail, there's all these modes of transport. There's also, I think we didn't talk about NMT, non-motorized transport, the use of cycling. Yeah. So imagine if there was this point whereby you go to each and every Metro Rail or process station, then you find a bicycle there that you can just rent out, cycle, just go to one place, pick up whatever that you want to do. I feel like that would be way convenient for myself. But I feel like, integration is very important in the sense that you don't have to go from, you don't have to go, how Park Station, I don't know how you guys are all acknowledge. Park Station, I think it's an example of integration of transport.
Yes.
It's a very, very good, like once you're there, like, come on, you can, there's taxis,
there's
buses, there's everything, and there's all different types of buses, long distance, short distance, you can get everything. So I think that's the perfect example that we can use in Johannesburg, in the city, to say, let's use this example and find ways that we can, expand and see the benefits of, integrating transport and making it as one. And there's also, we should also harvest on the innovative side. Maybe we could use like a payment system whereby if I have a one card or maybe a form of, maybe a one pay system or something like that. If I have a card, I know in this card I can load money. The same thing with Gautrain, Imagine my colleague here, DK Dimpo. You've gotten into the Gautrain and now you want to go to a place whereby the Gautrain doesn't go. Let's say you want to visit your dear friend, your dear colleague in Ndivhuwo here. You want to go to Lombardy, but now Gautrain doesn't go there. But you have a card, and a card on you can use it. You can also pay taxi on it. So that's what we mean by integration. We're not saying we mean that, okay, they should there be on the same spot, but we mean that even if I don't have cash or I only have a Gautrain card on me, I can also use that card, right? And then use it on Metrobus, on Rea Vaya, on all these type of motorized transport that I can use. So I feel like that's also what we mean by integration. And when I say no, I feel like integration won't work because I feel like it will only bring more conflict. So let's go to the point of taxis, buses, Rea Vaya, and also e-hailing. We all know in the current context of South Africa, we have had experiences whereby there's always conflict between e-hailing and taxi guys. And not only that, we can even expand it to recently on our honors class, we went to Durban. And when we went to Durban, we were looking at, we had a project, and the project we're doing site visit on Durban and taking the metro. And when we're doing our research, one of the loopholes or side or impediment to integration of transport was like this fight between your BRT route, your bus rapid transport systems, and then in Durban I think they term it the Go Bus. Similarly, same concept at the Rea Vaya. So what you had was these two institutions, the bus ones and the taxi guys, were fighting for routes to say, nah, but the BLT guys are taking our business, they're taking our people. So in that case, integration brings conflict because now you're bringing all these two different groups of people that are working. And now to the taxi guys, it's like more saying like, but we've been here ever since apartheid. We haven't even received a government subsistence. We have been independent throughout. So it's now to them, it's like, oh, it's absurd for government now to also. I feel like that's also one of the reasons why formalization of taxes has also been a problem and a very challenging issue, because now it's like, why now when you now see and people don't realize, by the way, that when we talk about the informal economy, we could also say the taxi industry is part of the informal economy. And imagine how successful it is. So it's one of these things, it's how we also define it. If now we can also, I can include my research and insights on that. So it's also about how we actually define this informal economy. What do we actually mean by that? Because we now see the success of the taxi industry. I mean, we can all say it's by far one of the most successful public transport. Well, although it has its shortcomings, okay, for the mere fact that it's not scheduled, for the mere fact that you can't access it late at night, for the mere fact that whenever I go inside there, I have the taxi driver to deal with, all those impediments. But honestly, integration is something that I strongly agree on, support, because at the end of the day, I feel like transport innovation, public transport, the center of it, at the core of it, the end user should be the focus.
Yes.
The focus should be on the end user. It shouldn't be about you taking business from me. It shouldn't be about competition. It shouldn't be about, but it should be what's best for the end user. In this case, it would be me as the customer using it. So integration benefits me. It might not benefit the guys operating in the industry, the public transport industry, but for me as an end user, I feel like that's what it means for a good, efficient public transport. It's if me as an end user, I'm happy with the service that I'm receiving. So in that case, I'm fully agree on integration. So.
No, I hear your points of view. That was a well thought out and balanced, a reflection of integration. Yes, most definitely. Even I agree. It has its positives and it does have its negatives. But nevertheless, we should seek to use the example the president he gave us. I think it's probably one of the most successful stories in the country. However, it still has its loopholes with regards to this card system that we can use flexibly and interchangeably to now give us more choices to enhance what Ndivhuwo was speaking about, to say public transport kinds of restricts mobility through the fact that you might have money in your Gautrain card, but you don't have cash on you, and now you can't use a taxi per se, or maybe even an Uber or a bus or whatever. Yes, this is now most definitely getting heated. As you can see, I've taken off my jacket. But just trying to wrap up what Ronald and Ndivhuwo was speaking about. So with regards to this whole notion of integration, I agree with it too. Look, it's an ecosystem firstly, and all things have to be integrated. And I like the fact that you actually used a successful example of Park Station. Look at how Park Station has almost all these transport amenities you need, including the Gautrain, obviously with the exception of sea and air, like airplanes, but the most land ones that people need are there. So this thing of integration is not a thing that was never thought out or attempted, because the Gautrain in 2001, the Gauteng Transport Authority actually tried to now integrate buses going to Soweto and other outlying areas, even reaching Pretoria. However, that never materialized. And in 2008 as well, there was an attempt to integrate the two services, but the plans that were actually drafted, according to retired UJ professor Von Mastraat, were never really implemented. And now going back to the e-toll report of 2014, people actually rejected the system, stating that in order for them to believe the system, public transport must now improve first. So now I'm trying to now open up this whole notion of voice to my colleagues by looking at what Head stated or spoke about untouched in wicked public policy problems. He mentioned the issue of how do we now try and enhance, better knowledge? How do we now encourage co-production of knowledge, and how do we also use third-party organizations to now, aid and assist in planning? So, Ndivhuwo, can you please, touch on and share this whole notion of voice and how we can actually be better involved in trying to shape transport how we want it to be?
Okay, yes, of course. I think you mentioned a good point. And as far as a voice goes, I mean, it just shows that if people can stand, like if the public stands together enough, we can change course, how things are run. The e-toll, that did not last. Everyone was like, there's no ways we're paying that.
Yeah.
No one did. They could not arrest everyone.
Yeah.
So I think it just goes to show how a voice is important. If there is solidarity among people, we can change things. We can use our voice to be like, okay, but this is not working. Similarly, I think the taxi industry does that well when it comes to it and the government.
Yes,
they will literally stop the country.
Yeah,
the country will not function unless they get what they want. So I think voice is really important, because it just shows that if people can come together, stand for one thing, and be solid about it, we can achieve something. Yeah, and I just think the issue of voice, people stood so much in solidarity with each other regarding being against the e-toll, such that the government felt the obligation that they would pay back the contributors, the people that actually did contribute and paid. And it just shows that if the notion of voice is very important when it comes to urban planning and in anything really. I think also, just to divert a little bit, you mentioned something about an ecosystem.
Yes.
And I think as far as integration goes, I like that you said ecosystem instead of like one thing, because an ecosystem, everything still has its own identity.
Yes, true.
You still have, you function as your own, but in a harmonious sense. So I think the integration of different transport system does not necessarily mean that they have to function as one, but it means how they work together in a single space to produce the most viable mobile city or settlement. Yes. And lastly, the issue of third parties, wicked problems in public policy. I think Head states that the issue with such integration, is that there's the third party that we don't see. There's the problem of how decisions come about, who makes decisions, what are the power dynamics between these things, and those are the things we don't see. So I think we need to find a way where we can involve third parties and some sort of transparency to know the train of thought on how certain things were done, why they were so. Yes, because what often happens is that power dynamics within hidden systems change the way decisions are made, and that is hidden from the public. So the public generally thinks that a certain thing is occurring because somebody may be planners, maybe the government made a choice, whereas there are complex power dynamics within the public transport system that we don't see, that could just provide complex issues.
That was a really, really interesting and nice view from Ndivhuwo. And just touching on that point, you revisited the ecosystem part. I like how she mentions that even integrating them. It's not like you're dismissing the identity or the expression one used to find. You just say, you know what, we acknowledge you can be one thing that we use to enhance this one word we like using when we speak about transport, which is mobility. So without, you know, wasting too much time, let me now allow Ronald as well to now share his view with regards to this notion of voice.
Well, I'd say voice is a very critical and very important tool that we can leverage as planners to use and give certain actors within the public space, within the public transport, the users, the people that benefit from public transport, all of those people. We can use voice in the sense that, let's say, for instance, let's say there's a BRT initiative that they want to do a BRT or a TOD initiative of some sort. And one of the requirements of TOD is that within or surrounding these stations, there should be like a mixed-use development or high density of some sort, mixed with commercials in whatever manner they want. So let's say in the process or in the planning process of making the vision actually become realized. So one of the requirement is that planners should engage the public. Okay, what I'm saying. So in that manner, it's more or less saying that let's give the public, the end users of these facilities, infrastructure, the end users of these transport, the end users of all these, let's give them the voice to say, what do you guys want? You know, so that's very important to say, because now it gives us different diversity of views to say, okay, like we also mentioned, in the before the issue of safety, to say safety is a big issue when it comes to maybe like traveling at night for most females. So now you take it back to me as a guy, I'd argue to say it's not like I felt safe or not safe. In fact, when it was night, I would be excited because these guys will just, you know, pin on the throttle and I'll get home early. You get what I'm saying? So it's a very different view. So in that sense, if now I'm a planner and I'm receiving all these views, I get to make, you know, give voice to these people. But I feel like it's not only about voice, you know, but it's also about giving expression to that voice. You get what I'm saying? To say the voice must be expressed in a way that is very raw and it's not filtered. So you get what I'm saying? So when you say policy, when we have policy, when even policymakers like engage in policy making decisions or discussions, I feel like one of the things that they usually miss is that there's this idea that input is usually collected during public participation. Input is collected, but we don't really know, and they even mentioned power dynamics, we don't really know who makes decisions. But we can even boil it down to say who actually sought out these different views. How do we now say views of group X or views of certain people, or these views, or if let's say I say they should be commercial or they should be taxis instead of buses. Who makes these views to become the paramount? You know, who comes about what's the process of actually making these views actually turned into a plan? So it's all about saying, let's involve the people who we giving voice to as planners. Is actually, it's all about involving them throughout the entire process, not only on the initial phase whereby you're trying to get the perspective or their perspective on certain maybe policy or certain initiative. It could be a TOD, like I mentioned. Not only that, but also including them throughout the entire process. So from initial phase to the point whereby they sit with planners, they sit with municipal councils, within the tribunals, they actually express their voice and they express their opinions on how things should be actually carried out. And it's also very important that now through that it's actually what most urban scholars will actually coin is that it's different from public participation. It's no longer about, you know, I'm sitting there and we're having dialogue, you telling me what you want and I'm out there listening. It's not only about that, but it's about actively involving the people throughout the process. You know, like it's like by co-producing. So we actually, like you mentioned, this also this way to say we're co-producing this outcome. So we're working together through art. It's not only about you're gonna tell me in the initial phase like I outlined earlier. But so I think it's also very crucial. And also a very point that we can also touch on is consciousness, giving people actually information, ideas about different modes of transport, enlightening them about like how can they use their voice, how can they use their constitutional right to actually make the services that they receive, especially from taxis. Because I think one of the shortcomings that you have taxis, they're not necessarily regulated, they make their own rules, so they will actually like give middle finger to the end user. It's like you're gonna follow, you're gonna do by our rules, or you find other means of transport, so it's not really a conducive customer relationship between the customer and the people that are giving you service. It's not a healthy relationship, because I feel like it should be, with Gautrain you can actually lodge a complaint. You get what I'm saying? If I'm not happy with the service, I can actually go to the headquarters. Well, I don't know where the headquarters are, but probably you can actually go there and actually lodge a complaint and say, well, I'm not happy with service, who this person actually, and your service can actually be improved. But when you look at taxis, when you look at your Vias, you get other form of transport, there isn't that. So maybe there's some elements that we can learn from Gautrain, and then maybe we could also like inform people to say, use your rights, use your voice, use your everything at your disposal that you can. Because I feel like most people that actually use like your low cost transport systems don't really get, and their voice don't really end up being expressed enough, because it's like, who's gonna make money out of low cheap products? But it's like more like similar that. But I feel like voice consciousness, and all.
Very much, Ronald. I think you gave us a very nuanced view, and you tried how to now show the link that now voice is backed up with, or that voice now gets from this connection of consciousness. So speaking about those two concepts, I think we have to now transition to another tool, or rather two other useful tools that are very pertinent in our modern age, due to the fast-paced nature of how things evolve and transition. So that would now be data and intelligence. By data, what I now mean is, look at how the Gautrain is so easily accessible to a point whereby you can get these schedules off your phone. And is that now inclusive or exclusive, bearing in mind this whole notion of the digital divide? Is everyone now able to access it? That might also be another barrier or so this whole notion of the digital divide, one now has to explore. Is it also a deterrent for like people using the Gautrain because they do not have access to it? Or does it also now reduces, the, how can I put it, the optimization of the whole system? So by this I mean now everyone being fully involved. And then this whole notion of data, I want to also interlink it with intelligence. So with intelligence is, let's look at my study area for an example, where the Gautrain goes, and you start to see that it's mostly targeted at your workers, because the major areas it focuses on is that voter world, space node there, and then it also goes to Mall of Africa, Cars World, and Waterfall. So you now look, those areas, yes, they are for workers, but it doesn't go to your communities, and I kind of understand why, because it's mostly low density. If we look at this policy called the draft nodal review policy. So what it now speaks about is it tries to now develop these TODs along areas where there's high population. The minimum stipulation is 60 dwellings per hectare. So you start to look at why maybe the Gau bus rather doesn't spread into those areas, to say the density is not high. But there are areas around Midrand, not far from the Gautrain, like not far from Tembisa, densely, growing settlements that side. Maybe that could also be like something that's now explored to say, how can we now get people within these communities now starting to infiltrate the system? So it's that notion of data and intelligence and how they go about now trying to determine their route. So what I want to now take us to is this integrated system of, varying different bodies. So for example, the Gautrain Management Agency, the PRASA board, and all these taxi boards, are they now disconnecting transport even further? Or do you think that even if we had one authority, the situation would be the same? So do you think, Ronald, I'd like to start with you on this one. Do you think that if we had one transport authority, things would be better?
Well, okay. So I'd say to an extent, yes, centralizing power to a point makes things faster in a way that, decision gets taken faster. So rather than now having like 50 bodies deciding on one thing, now you have only one body that will just like decide, okay, this is how the nodal review policy is going to be like. This is how things is going to be like. So in that aspect, yes, it will help, but also with that, it's also a system whereby you can have different opinions, so a centralized power, as you know, there's so many scholarly readings on that and so many evidence of how, centralized power actually does sometimes to an extent lead to like difficulties in terms of like, fostering forward, because now you can have one power monger individual that will just decide whatever they want to decide based on their vested interest, so that's actually a problem in that. But if you can have like well thought leaders, leadership people that that are put in the leadership positions, that can actually have a vision forward to say, if even though it's a centralized power, but they know that their mandate is the end user, and in this case the customer, to say everything must speak to the customer, everything must give the customer expression, and also when it comes to intelligence, and I'm also thinking, and I just had an idea to say, okay, I'm thinking of smart cities. When you pull up the intervention there, I'm thinking, okay, how can smart cities actually make transport efficient and actually sustainable, So you mentioned one thing about having an app in Gautrain where you can actually see everything that there is to know about Gautrain, and I'm actually thinking that can actually be an important tool to actually use, to say, let's give people platforms, or maybe let's have an app whereby even though systems are not really integrated, even though I can have taxi ride being at one point and the other one being at another place, but having an app that can actually direct me where I can access these different modes of transport, that will actually be beneficial, that will actually be informative, So I think in that regards, and also, exploring this fourth industrial revolution side, using technology like I think I mentioned earlier on so it's like the use of a payment system that can be used for all transport, but that actually has its also limits in regard to, you all know how the digital divide, you actually touch on that. You all know how majority of South Africans don't actually have access to data, they don't actually have access to smartphones and all that stuff. So it will be kind of like challenging